Good morning, everyone. This is Ramoladi from Ramoladi Reports. I'm here this morning with Marie LaBelle, and we're here to talk about an interesting news story out of Melbourne. And this has to do with the visit of mental health services to somebody's house. One moment while I take care of the feedback. Meanwhile, Marie can say hello.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me on the show. And today we are looking at what happens, or sort of a guide to what happens when people from mental health show up at your doorstep. And what do we do, and what's going on in this situation?
Yes, absolutely. And the story that we're here to talk about really today has to do with Anthony Nessie, who is a human rights campaigner and a citizen journalist who lives in Melbourne. And he is someone who who recently had a very unfortunate incident occur on his street, with a lot of harassive drivers charging up and down his street and actually engaging in vandalism on his property, where the back window of his windshield, his back windshield, I think, was broken, and a window on his house as well was broken by people who were driving up and down the street. In other words, absolute strangers to that street and to that neighborhood. And Anthony, because he does such a great job filming such incidents, has indeed put up on YouTube on his channel, which is called Gang Stalking in Australia. And I'll, place the link at the end of this show, at the bottom of this video. He's put up his several videos of what occurred a couple nights ago. And what occurred was, you can see all these cars zooming up and down. There's one occasion where he actually engages with the drivers of one of the cars and says, "Who are you? Where are you coming from? You don't live in this neighborhood." And this guy kind of gets into an altercation with him, and, words are exchanged and things get heated. Later on in the night, he records, I guess from some kind of static camera setup, he records two people coming up in a car, driving up in a car, parking just outside his house, running up to his house and literally kicking in the window on the house. Now, I can't tell if this is the back part of the house or the front part of the house, but it's the window facing the street. And that window is broken. So this is actually captured on camera, and I have seen this entire episode. I wanted to show it this morning, but when I went online to look for this particular video, I couldn't find it. So this particular video has vanished. And perhaps we'll find out very soon from Anthony what the story is there with this particular video. But
that's an important video, Ramola, too, because that's really a piece of evidence in many ways, because this fellow, Anthony, is being harassed by mental health police and police unit. And he has very good reason to have been upset, Anthony does, and to have even called the police when somebody's come to his door and knocked down his windows. He's had every right to.
Exactly. And this is what I wanted to just sort of lay the background here a little bit for that mental health visit, which we're going to go into in just a minute. But what you're pointing out is absolutely important, because this was evidence. This is physical evidence of actual people vandalizing his property, his window on his house. So in any case, this particular video aside, there were a couple other videos that continue to be on YouTube, and you can see in those videos, you can see people charging up and down the street. And one of the things that Anthony notices is that these cars have one headlight on, one headlight off. Now, this is very common COINTELPRO stalking. People around the world actually are reporting this. And this is part of the organized stalking, global Gestapo, quote unquote, gang stalking that many people are reporting from around the world. This is part of what, what many people analyze or surmise is part of the New World Order community harassment activities that are going on.
That's a bit unusual. Just to point out something, to be in this day and age when headlights when you put on your headlights and both of them go on at the same time, as for the way that vehicles are manufactured, one would almost have to go in and do something very unusual to be able to have one light go on, one off. So almost deliberately doing something to your vehicle to adhere to this signaling or whatever it means.
Absolutely. It's very much, if people notice, a whole stream of cars with one headlight on, one headlight off, I think you can look at that and say, this looks like a pattern. This looks like a pattern in action, which means there is some intention here, etc. This is obviously not an issue of jumping to conclusions. This is an issue of simple, clear, clean observation. Right.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So in any case, this is one of the things that Anthony had noticed in his video as he, filmed these cars driving up and down. But as you know, we need to remember two things. There were harassive stalkers in the neighborhood driving up and down. And, excuse me, and his windshield was broken and the window on his house was broken. So this was the backdrop. And then we have what happened next is he got a call from a psychiatrist at a local hospital asking him, telling him that the police had called him, saying that the neighbors had called the police, stating that he, the victim of vandalism, was a troublemaker. So what Anthony was doing to protect himself in the sense of attempting to get a recording of people charging up and down the street, people coming in, vandalizing his house, etc., that particular act of filming and recording is now being targeted as an act of troublemaking. By who precisely becomes clear when you look at the mental health video. So perhaps at this point I should share screens and show the mental health video, because what the mental health video is doing, this happened after he has this conversation with the psychiatrist and explains to him, look, I was vandalized.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the one who was troublemaking over here. But after that, he had this visit. So I'm going to click share. And you can see, so what happened is two social workers showed up with two policemen at his house. And Marie, do let me know if you have trouble hearing this.
No, I'm good. And I think this is very important. I'm going to ask our audience to really pay attention on this video, because I think we'd like to point out different areas where we want to point out where the workers are setting up Anthony. And I think it's important to see what they're up to. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. If you can turn up a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
It's on my YouTube channel. So how do you know about me running on the street? Yeah. But how do you know about how I ran on the streets? Yeah, I know, but what's that? That must have been the wrong report, because on my YouTube channel it shows something different. My back window was destroyed.
Can we stop? Can we go to the police officers and stop for a moment, Romola?
You want to go back to the police officer for a minute?
Yeah. Can we take a visual on the police officers? I want to point something out to the audience.
Sure. Hold on. Let me try that. Oh boy, it keeps coming back to the front. Let me play it a bit and then try to pause it.
Yeah. It's on my YouTube channel. If you want Mum to join us, she's most welcome. So how do you know about me running on the street? Yes.
Got some very passive aggressive body language coming from the police officers, and that's what I really wanted to capture here. And it's really inappropriate if this was legitimately caring about an individual and health, if they actually really cared about the fellow they were coming to see. I don't think we'd have police officers who would be demonstrating such ferocious dispositions. They're making it quite clear that, don't mess with us. We are in charge. Like, it's a very, very clear signal that they're giving in their body language. It's very intimidating.
Yes.
Take a look at them.
Yeah, I
Yep.
noticed they
Take a look
both
at them.
had their arms crossed, etc.,
Mhm.
and they were standing very firmly behind.
And look at the way she's looking. See, everybody take a look. Even the girls here, we're going to get to the young women, but look at the guy. Look at his snooty. He's kind of snooting with his nose, like, oh, what is this? I've got better things to do with my time. And the arms, especially the fellow who's next on the right hand side, who's really got his arms crossed. And look at that. Now look at the body language, especially leaning back. What he's saying in a very, very I mean, it's passive aggressive, but very aggressive is don't mess with me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here. And it's a very strong statement.
Oh, yes. And remember that when we talk about police, we're talking about people who have been granted the privilege of carrying guns. So they are, they are people with weapons on their person. So this is a symbol of power and authority in this situation as well. So that's something to be aware of. When police come into a situation, the question has to be asked, why are they there? Are they legitimately there? Is there a crime that they are investigating? And are they listening to the victim? So this is a situation where the victim, unfortunately, is being visited by mental health community services, and the police appear to be there as some kind of background authority, giving their seal of approval to mental health community services
Well,
rather
more
than
than,
to the victim.
and very much they're putting a bullying disposition on. And what I see is we're looking very no differently than police interrogation, even though that police interrogation is delivered by two pleasant looking and pleasant acting young women from health services. They're really policing and interrogating him. And then you've got the other two police back there with their arms like this, so that you've really got mental health police.
Very
You got
good point.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is more like mental health police and an actual interrogation
Mhm.
rather than a friendly neighborhood visit. So despite the suggestion and the outward appearance of sociability over here.
What I noticed about the video, and I think audience can tell too, and I mentioned this earlier, is that Anthony's very gallant, meaning he gives a lot of respect to the women. He tries to teach them a little about targeting. He actually, in some ways, you could say either falls for the trap if they are putting a trap, or he's just a very gallant, respectful man. Okay, he's a gentleman, and he actually tries to explain things. And yet, these two women, young women, take advantage of that, and you can see that they're pulling every little bit of information they can from him. They try to catch him they try to catch him in intake to be able to basically have the data, like, are you having trouble sleeping, are you thinking about hurting yourself? You notice all the questions come in.
Yeah, let's just play a little bit of this, and then maybe I'll see if I can bring up some of the questioning part, and then we can talk a little bit more about this, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Marie, so let's.
I've just taken down my YouTube channel on the side of the car. All right, so this is just the start. I'm just going to see how things are going to be when I'm driving around. No, just my glasses. No, my glasses. It's just letting people know that I'm filming from my glasses. You can see the glasses there.
Very patronizing. Look at the women, everyone. Very patronizing.
You got to edge.
Yes, instead of questioning that somebody else, instead of taking the attention away from Anthony to the people who have executed this crime of vandalism on his car, they question why he would need to record them. This is absolute absurdity.
Blaming the victim. Very
Yes,
similar to blaming the rape victim. How's that? A rape.
absolutely.
Okay, so what we're looking at is a similarity where the victim reports a rape and the police and mental health police, rather than listening and being humane about it, they're actually just blaming the victim. It's his fault he got vandalized. It's the
Exactly.
victim's fault that they got
Exactly.
raped.
And
Same
we
thing
and
going
we
on.
need and we need to find out why he did it. Why he invited it, why he went after and recorded it, or why he's talking about it. This
Mm-hmm.
is so absurd.
Before you come to speak to me, gang stalking Australia. It's worldwide. A lot of people like me are complaining. It's hard to do that. You got to go to YouTube.
Take a look at, you see the girl with the long hair, everyone? Not the one in the bun, but the hair down. She's very interested, that one with the snare. She's really good little actress. So what she does is she tries to come off as being a little insecure about herself and like she is learning. Yeah, tell me, and patronizing. But she has one agenda and one agenda only. And she's using that uh, sort of presentation in order to trap Anthony. Okay, so she's luring him into being the gentleman that he is, and really what she wants is she just wants him to answer her questions to give her data. It's a trap. Does everybody see that? This one?
Yes, let's actually watch for a little bit longer so everyone gets a sense of, the kind of questioning that she's doing over here, because it
Yeah,
becomes very obvious that this is actually an intake and it's a very leaded or a led on kind of intake.
very much. Okay.
You got it. It's hard to explain. It's hard to explain. It's hard to explain. Well, they let me know about 2 years ago. I've been followed around by the police. It's run by the government. A lot of people reckon it's run by the government. So police, ambulance, drug dealers, and drug addicts. That's what they let me know when I was getting followed. I went to the police station. They told me they know nothing about it. Okay, yeah. But I wasn't recording then nothing because that's when they were letting me know about the program. They sensitize you to a lot of things. Or just people. Because they recruit members of the public. Just normal people, not normal average people, all backgrounds. Well, you've got to go to my YouTube channel. Yeah, I know that, but you should really go that first, then before you speak to me. Do your research first, then you can speak to me. A lot of people around the world are thinking that. Why are they targeted? I wasn't doing nothing wrong. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Look at my YouTube channel. I've got a few documentaries about a lot of things. I'm having a look through, but I'm not going to watch them, okay? Just because they're...
So I'm going to just move it on a little bit to some more questions that she's asking.
Yeah, I noticed that they're asking him questions trying to elicit information that they can use for their data. So notice how they're asking him questions constantly, like, well, what do you think that is? Why do you think that is?
Exactly.
They're
And it's
hoping he
almost
falls for the trap.
which also suggests, doesn't it, that there is a sort of a pre-planned scenario that they have in mind, and they are attempting to pigeonhole him or fit him into that pre-plan. So I'm just going to show a couple more spots where they ask questions. So let's just watch a couple more spots, and then let's go down to the very end, and then we can talk a bit more.
But not really. I've taken down the YouTube channel now because I want to see what's going to happen when I'm out driving. Sorry, guys. It's packed in here. It's all cigarettes here. Okay. No, it's okay. No, no, no. No. No, no. No, no. I've got no mental illness, not whatsoever. What do you mean? Yeah. No. 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 Well, I have to chuck my phone away because I've got software on LG called E-Track. And the only people who can do that is the government, right? Who else can do that? And yeah, because I've got a mate who's got a computer shop. And all the benefit of computers have the right knowledge. So I have to chuck it away. He told me that you need that. So I chucked my phone away. No, no, no. I ripped out the Wi-Fi. Because if you've got a Wi-Fi, they can connect to it. Hackers can connect to it. What company? No, I've got the internet, but I just use that for my main computer. Yeah. Plus, I can't upload anything. Okay? Well, yeah, it's hacked. It's been hacked. There's not much I can do. I've got to go on the internet because I don't watch TV. So. Like I said, when I was going through, especially the times when I wasn't like when they didn't let me know what was on, that was much better. Once I knew, because once I was starting in follow, like I said, by the people that's following me, I went on the internet, wrote down the same thing, and people around the world are saying people need to talk. And it's a massive, yeah. So I was planning to sell my house, and people around the world are saying if you sell, it doesn't matter where you go, it's gonna happen there again. So I chose to stay. It was a few years ago, completely changed. People, everyone that see when I have a cigarette, I stop there and in the last 3 years, I don't recognise no one. Yeah. No, it's got people that are originally living here, but as the streets down there, I don't recognise no one.
So that's a lot of questions and a lot of lead up. And, there is information over there that Anthony's provided about hacking, which many of us watching and listening are familiar with because many of us have indeed experienced cyber hacking and phone hacking. And if you've been reading the news and watching the Snowden revelations, you'll know that, in fact, hacking is going on. It is not in any way an imagined or deluded understanding to notice and to observe that you're being hacked and to take precautions against it. And it sounds like he's taken some precautions. He's gotten off Wi-Fi, so he's probably using an Ethernet cable or some kind of, physical connection to the internet through his router, etc. So,
we had a really good show, sorry, Romola, back several months ago with Karen Stewart. And I think what we were looking at was the fact that these doctors or nurses or mental health professionals are really mental health police, both in that they take records to go to the main center, but also that they're deployed to take down anybody that questions the system. Anybody that haven't might actually realize that we are being listened to or we can be listened to. They'll sick the mental health police on you so that you're deemed paranoid, crazy, lock them up.
Yes,
so you get
exactly.
You get the very low level functioning. Sorry, girls, but you're very low level and you're functioning. Okay, these women that are coming to the door, very low level consciousness. Sorry, I'm calling it as I see it. In my opinion, because they're just given a set of questions. They want to get some data on the guy and they want to bring him in. But if they ever thought to themselves, well, wait a minute, are we working with a human being? And is that a nice thing to do? Let's talk about humanitarianism. Not much humanitarianism going on with these young women. They're humanoid. I like that term. They're humanoids. Sorry, girls, in my opinion.
Well, the point that you're making over here about mental health being roped in many, many situations in our society today, not as caregivers, but rather as policing personnel, people who are policing communities, societies, situations, people. Interactions, interpersonal interactions, people speaking out. They're policing everything, and it's obnoxious because we're living in a situation of extreme and exacerbated surveillance. So when people observe and remark and speak out about that surveillance, that is obviously not paranoia. That is obviously not delusion.
Oh, no,
that that is recognition of the circumstance and situation that we in societies around the world are finding ourselves today. And I should point out to people that I'm in the USA, Marie is in Canada, and this case that we're looking at is occurring
Sorry
in
about that.
Melbourne.
We all say sorry here. Sorry for being sorry. That I'm
So,
sorry.
right. So I'm going to go a little further on, possibly to where they deliver their verdict, having spoken to Anthony for a little while and interrogating him to bits, questioning him not merely on what happened recently, but also on his meds, his lifestyle, his life, his mother, who lives with him, and all sorts of other extraneous things that really have no place in a casual conversation.
What we're looking at before you play it is again, I really love to look at this point, is that you've got these, sorry everybody, humanoids, okay? A type of a personality, and humanoided to different degrees, okay? And what I mean by humanoided is they're not critically thinking and they're not feeling. Okay, they're very low level function. They're a bit like slaves. I'm thinking of Huxley. I'm thinking 1984, but particularly the Huxley Brave New World, where you've got a bunch of very low level functioning alphas, betas, and they have their particular roles and so on. And you see this right here, very low level functioning and very rude. I mean, absolutely. In this case, their function is to police Anthony and to degrade any of his insights and courage, really, to talk up about things. And they're literally just throwing him right into the garbage. But they're not very high functioning in what they're displaying here.
And I should also point out that because of the situation and the circumstance of exacerbated surveillance, that this occurrence of this event is ensconced within, we have to question to what extent this is real or a setup. In other words, to what extent is this nothing but a framing of Anthony over here? Because if there is concern in the neighborhood among the neighbors, to such an extent that they need to call in mental health community services, then you would expect that mental health community services discuss both the neighbors as well as Anthony. But in this particular case, we see these two women simply focusing and zeroing in on Anthony and leading him on with all sorts of invasive and intrusive questions, complete privacy violations, stepping over all bounds, and seeking to get information out of him that he can't even give them. He says things like, "Do you hear voices? Do you look at the TV and think that they are speaking to you or making remarks about you?" That's a very leading question, a very odd and a very peculiar question. If you think about it, that's obviously a setup, because when you look at the DSM and you look at the layout of the many disorders that are marked up in the very fraudulent and highly controversial DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Disorders, which many psychiatrists themselves question and find extremely controversial. Even the guys who actually put it together have now renounced it. Like Francis Allen, the head of the NIH, I think he was on the board that created the DSM. So, and he stepped back and he started to speak openly about the horrors of psychiatry and the horrors of the DSM and the absolute totalitarian fascism of it. So given that, what they are asking, these questions are literally questions that would elicit answers that would fall within the very specific descriptions of certain disorders.
Very good point. They're literally giving him a what do they call those DSM tests? They're literally giving one to him. I wouldn't be surprised if the questions they've asked are actually on a test. And they give the test to people. And some of them are designed such that they've already decided you have some kind of mental disorder. It's just a question of which one. And depending on and I don't really I'm not a psychologist, but depending on their approach, they may be doing that right now. They may have already decided that he's cracked up or whatever they're going to call him. And they're literally just trying to carve in what's the diagnosis. And again, they're not there for good intent, to be nice humanitarian people. Why are you bringing police? Take a look at That's
exactly. Very
I
good
don't
point.
think
Why would you bring police if this were indeed a friendly neighborhood visit from people, who had an interest in caring for someone,
there's no
caring
caring
about
here.
somebody's
There's no
mental?
caring.
You would not bring the police.
No.
So let's look a little bit further at and see what they have to say. Okay, so back to school and his life. I want to just actually go down to their little diagnosis here.
Turn that up a little wee bit for me.
I'm turned up to the max.
No, honestly, no, no, no. Because I don't need to, and I'm fine.
Sorry, what did they ask him, Romola?
I'm sorry, is this very, very soft? Do you want me to try to turn it up a little bit more?
Because they obviously make a suggestion here. Thank you.
I'm going to stop share for just a second and see if I can mess with the audio settings on my speaker and the camera over here. Oh, this is max as well. I've turned it max. So let me go back. And just play it.
Well, I'm not going to speak about this problem. I'm just speaking to you about that now, but not in the future. If you want to know about my problem, go to the YouTube channel. Well, yeah, I don't mind that. Doesn't bother me. Mm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that. Every target individual goes through it. Yeah. Yeah. Doesn't bother me.
I'm just going to go back a little bit because I missed the part where she actually pronounced a little diagnosis of suicide. This is just before she said that.
I don't know. I'm just saying.
What did she say?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was just before this.
No, these girls are
Oh,
very
here it is. Here it is. Yeah.
I'm so confused now. Is it going to change now? Or? Yeah. Like in what way? Yeah, like, have you gone to my YouTube channel? Exactly. Yeah.
So do you see, I just wanted to pause then. We can, perhaps switch off the video at this point because they continue to talk to him and then they leave him with this, notation that they're going to come back and they're going to keep tabs on him, etc. And they also tell him that they're going to sick the Mental Health Act on him and get an order and forcibly remove him to a hospital and have him forcibly examined by a psychiatrist if he does not cooperate with them. And from contact with Anthony, he tells me that they've been visiting him every day since this particular video, which occurred a few days ago. So you notice that at the end of this conversation, even though they got a lot of information from him, and he also told them to go to his YouTube channel and see that he was the victim of vandalism and harassment and stalking, they totally steamrolled that over that, totally ignored that, and kept focusing on the pre-planned notion of delusion and paranoia that they appear to have entered the conversation with.
They came over, what seems clear to me, and again, I always preface this by saying, in my opinion, I'm not a psychologist, I don't have, or a psychiatrist, but it appears they have their agenda. They have their goal from the beginning of walking up to the house. Literally, they bring the police with them because they're expecting to have resistance. They want to take this guy into the hospital. They want to imprison him. Those girls are there to interrogate him, catch him, arrest him for being mentally, for sensing. Let's go to Equilibrium. Okay, Equilibrium is a nice movie I like with Christian Bale. And again, in this movie, it's against the law to sense, to feel. So they call them sense effects.
We lost your audio. But just to pick up on what Marie was saying, I still don't hear you, Marie. That indeed, that's okay. Yeah, we can use the phone. So basically, to continue what Marie was saying, yes, this is about every little thing that human beings are doing is now being seen as an offense. So, hi. Yeah, hold on just a minute. Hold on. I'm going to put you on speaker. Okay.
Goodness. Okay, everybody, I have my speakers plugged in. There's no reason whatsoever that these should be malfunctioning. Everybody, just putting it out there. I have no idea what's going on, but I will say that, again, these women are going in with agenda. They come in with the police. That's their backup, everybody. What do you do when you're a police officer going to bring somebody in? You're expecting a really big problem, maybe even a gun shoot down, to bring in backup. What do you think the cops are there for? There's backup. They are forcing this guy against his will into a mental health prison. And that's what I see here.
Yes, Marie, this is very concerning to me because, as you know, for the past 5 years, I have been examining the situation of people being targeted, definitely in the US, but also in countries in Europe, in the UK, in Canada and Australia, etc. I've spoken to many people who have experienced this kind of targeting and harassment. This is very organized, it's very structured, and it is very global, which does make you think about, the global Gestapo, the intelligence agencies working together, which they are. There are many intel agreements where intel agencies are working together. Fusion centers are carrying out the wishes of these intel agencies, and whoever runs them, whoever's behind them, we're talking about people who are very powerful and who are commandeering the fusion centers and the mechanisms of surveillance that the fusion centers have put into play. So what Anthony is saying is absolutely correct. The programs are global. The programs are in his neighborhood, but they're also in my neighborhood, and they are in your neighborhood, everybody who's watching. Everybody. These programs are in all of our neighborhoods. Definitely the Five Eyes countries, the so-called Five Eyes countries, right? That's the Commonwealth countries, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, the United States of America. What did I miss?
There's a lot that encompasses in Commonwealth.
The UK, of course, yes, yeah, and the UK.
Lots of us in the colonial pot.
Exactly, and so these systems that the fusion centers have put into place, whereby people are being notated as suspected terrorists or putative terrorists or possible terrorists. They've been written off as possible violent extremists. They're put on threat lists. People are being put on threat lists for the simplest things, for speaking out about something happening in your local community, perhaps.
I've often wondered, put this again, Operation Paperclip, where you're getting a lot of people, and that sort of came to fruition in 1948, where psychiatry and psychology became very leading edge, and because one can certainly put into question that they were put into place in order to take down people who started to question the system.
Absolutely, and that goes back to the Tavistock Institute. It goes back to psychological warfare that was instituted by the British way back then, followed through all through the Second World War, and as Anthony said, is also evidenced in the Stasi movement in East Germany, and has now returned, as COINTELPRO and as Gladio and as Phoenix operations in our countries, in all of our different countries. So there is complete precedent for what he's talking about. It is within the government setup. So for these two young social workers to hear the word government, or actually they didn't even hear it from him. I think they tried to put that word into his mouth. Do you think the government is after you, etc.? So they brought it up, as a sort of point of paranoia kind of thing. Yeah. That's part of their leading question brigade that they were doing over there. So, this is the context. This is the context. We are living in the 21st century. Surveillance is extreme, and the power given to these agencies is extreme. These agencies do need to be questioned because random people, innocent people, thousands of them are being put on these threat lists and terrorist lists. This is all part of the bogus war on terror.
What you've got, again, bogus war on terror, and what you've got, I mean, I like to turn my age as humanoid. Sorry about that to everybody, but when you've got the people who are professionals and working, in the capacity with those police officers and so on, they're not thinking, they're not feeling, they're operating at such a low level. And this is what concerns me about our new generation coming through, is that so long as they're not sensing, feeling, thinking, it's dangerous. Because what ought to have happened is someone ought to have, if they did come to the door of Anthony or Mr. Nessie, they should have sat down and listened to him and realized, well, it must be pretty upsetting to have something shoot the window.
Exactly.
Who isn't going to call the police when people come running in and smash the window? I mean, I'm going to call the police, and I'm going to be upset. I mean, it's normal. It's called being human. So I think what we're looking at, if I may be so bold, is maybe 10% of the people are human beings, and human beings do get upset. That's called being a human being. And then you've got humanoids where the norm is to be just like this and not do. That's the norm. So everybody take a look at Huxley. Brave New World is a very, very good example here, where Huxley was capturing, for those of you who don't know, Huxley was, I think 1938, not sure if he wrote it then or a little later. He's a university professor. And what Huxley captures in Brave New World, there's several important aspects of the world we're looking at today. And certainly that you've got these low-level, functioning, very dangerous professionals. They're stupider than stupid. Sorry.
Yes, and actually what you're talking about, and many would argue that actually, I think if you go back and look at the history, Huxley was indeed part of that very elitist, secret society setup, where it's entirely possible he wasn't writing science fiction, he was writing a little manifesto for the future. And here we are in the future. We are in 1984 and beyond at this point in time. We are well beyond the kind of extreme totalitarianism in 1984. So, and Brave New World. So what's happening now is that because this has been rolled out in our societies, people like you and me, Maureen, who are watching what's going on and who are speaking out openly about what's going on, are in a sense doing something that everybody in society needs to do. We need to take a step back, look at what's going on and say, hello, what on earth is going on here? Let's look at it one more time. Is this correct? Is this okay? Do we accept it? Is it okay for mental health community services to come barging in when my car has been vandalized or my window has been vandalized, and the police don't take a report and go after the criminals, but the police come after me and treat me as paranoid and delusional for reporting the criminals, or for filming the criminals or recording the criminals? What's going on? So, this is a very, very important video. I'm very grateful to Anthony for having taken this video of this mental health visit so that everybody in the world can now see it. It's on Gang Stalking Australia. I advise everybody, please download this video and put it up on your own channels. I'm sure Anthony will be glad, because it is a heads up to everybody around the world. What is mental health community services doing in our societies? What kind of powers have we given them? What kind of powers does the Mental Health Act in Australia have? What kind of powers does the Mental Health Act in Canada have, or in the United States have? Are these legitimate powers? Do we as humanity want to step in and change these rules, laws, and regulations so that they work for us and not against us? Because it appears to be that some of these acts and laws are currently working against us. And what is the point of that?
May I suggest that there are individuals in that video who are not very well up there, who have a sickness. The women and the two police officers, they're not human. So when you're suggesting to the audience and to everybody, the public here, that we start questioning suggesting things, which we're really asking, or what you suggested, is that people start becoming humans again. Become a human being, not a humanoid. Those 4 individuals were humanoids. They're sick. You can't think and feel and you're going to act that way, to really rope in a human being against their will to be imprisoned in an insane asylum or wherever. That's sick. It's frightening. And I think what we're asking people to do is to become human again.
That's a brilliant question, Marie. I'm so glad you brought it up. And I should tell our viewers right now, perhaps, that Marie and I are going to be launching a new series. Now, Marie and I have done podcasts before together, and that was on our Need to Know report series with Spotlight on Psychiatry Subverted. So we are, in a sense, going to continue that focus and that spotlight, but we're going to pull it out and make it a new podcast series, a completely exclusive podcast series. And we're going to be continuing questions about psychiatry, mental health, social situations, societies at large, societies all across the world. And we're going to be looking at different situations, whether it's psychiatry in the child care protection world or psychiatry in the targeted world, as, the Anthony... Sorry?
The industry world keeps pouring out. And again, when we look at the child industry workers, you're going to see them to be behaving in very similar fashion to the mental health police. So you're going to see a similar type of training where they try to lure people in this case, the victims or parents. They try to lure you into saying the wrong things to accumulate data on you. And again, they come with their police officers again. Very similar situation.
Yes, and absolutely. Yeah. And what I hope that we can do in this new series that we hope to get started very soon is, look at specific cases, and we will bring different people into our roundtable podcast, and we will do joint interviews together. We will also try to bring psychologists and psychiatrists into our roundtable podcast so we can have open conversations about the place of psychiatry in our societies. Is there a place for psychiatry? Is there a helpful place? Or what is psychiatry really doing? What is psychology really doing? How helpful are these so-called sciences? Are they helping humanity, or are they being used in a weaponized way against humanity currently?
Bingo. Weapon. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Let's leave this off for our heroes, which is Bobby Kennedy, J.F. Kennedy. We are picking up where they left off.
There we go. So stay tuned. We'll come back and we'll launch our series very soon. Thanks very much for watching today, everybody. And, please leave your comments below the video regarding Anthony's case. If you have any advice for Anthony, what he can do next, because the situation as it stands currently. And if you have any advice for the mental health services in Melbourne as well, please leave your comments for them. No doubt they'll be visiting this video on the web. So everybody's participation and thoughts are needed. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you so much, Marie, for joining me. And we'll see you all again very soon. Bye-bye.